Welcome to Onest. In today's episode, we're meeting Dr. Salmon, who's the manager of psychiatry at Whitman Walker Health in Washington, D.C., specializing in child, adolescent, and adult psychiatry with a focus on LGBTQ plus youth who face chronic interpersonal trauma. Matt has a bachelor in psychology from Arizona State University and completed medical school at Midwestern University in Arizona. He completed training in general psychiatry at Maricopa Integrated Health System in Phoenix, Arizona, and subspecialized in child and adolescent psychiatry at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital. After that, Matt completed a master in health and public interest at Georgetown University. Matt's unique perspective is shaped by personal experiences of growing up queer and autistic in a conservative Mormon household in Phoenix, Arizona, and the challenges of navigating a political landscape with a Republican Congressman father and undergoing sexual orientation conversion efforts, often referred to as conversion therapy. He wrote a book about his experiences to serve as a guide for others to learn how to recognize and overcome unconscious bias so they could embrace diversity. It is called Pride and Prejudice: Healing Division in the Modern Family and is available in Amazon or can be ordered through bookstores. Please welcome Dr. Matt R. Salmon. Hi, Matt. Welcome. So honored to talk to you today.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so fascinated with your story, with everything you have achieved and with everything you're doing now. So I really would love to start from the very beginning and end up with, of course, your book and everything you do now and how can people also learn more about you. So, but first and foremost, your upbringing plays a huge role in your success today. Can you tell us how it felt to grow up in a very prominent Republican Mormon household, and how did that shape you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, that upbringing is part of exactly like you're saying. It's a huge part of why I do what I do. If it weren't for that, I probably wouldn't have ended up having many of the experiences that I did. And, in my early life, growing up Mormon and with a Republican Congressman dad, that I guess to me, prior to about 8 or 9, I would say everything was great. I wouldn't have really, I think, known anything other than that life, because we lived in a bubble. It was in East Phoenix, a city called Mesa. It is a densely or one of the highest populations of Mormons outside of Salt Lake City. I think actually it is the highest population of Mormons outside of Salt Lake City. And there in Mormonism, you're taught to live in the world but not be of the world. And so that means forsaking considered worldly things. So there's no drinking, there's no coffee even. There's people are taught to be incredibly modest. And so, the values that I was raised with there were things like love and respect, and, treating others well. Those are things that I continue to carry with me when things started to get a little more difficult, When I turned 9 years old, that's the time that I recognized that I was gay. And it was then that my upbringing in Mormonism, where I was taught that to be gay was wrong, that it was an abomination, or even second to the sin of murder. That's when I became just kind of totally racked with guilt and shame. And I went from a very happy, playful to just fearful that I was going to suffer for eternity as a result of this, because I didn't see any way out of it. I tried everything I could, praying and fasting and reading scripture religiously. And I never really, it wasn't for years until I talked to my parents about it, because I was so afraid that when I did, I would have to leave the family, because I was taught to believe that for me to be gay would ruin my family's potential for eternal life together. And so I was so afraid of being that catalyst that I sat with it, and I focused on my schoolwork, and like I said, my religious study. I did everything I could to just kind of put my head down and distract myself. Plus, like we're saying that, like then with that Republican congressman, he also ran for governor, so he had a lot of experience in politics and being in the public eye, and and so that meant we had to be fairly image focused. My my mom put the fear of God and the liberal media inside each of us. If you do anything that like the liberal media could use to twist to harm your dad's reputation, that is some, like that would be on you, and that could really ruin his career. And so, you know, it wasn't just this like religious guilt that I had. It was also this like I had to also shoulder my dad's reputation and care about how things could impact him. And so it was, if it weren't for this experience, um, I wouldn't have gone down the path of beginning to question my upbringing as well. Um, you know, it most people, if they don't have a reason to question their upbringing or what they're taught, they're going to continue on in that way. And so, for me to have an identity that was directly in conflict with it, um, that was it. It took years for me to get there, but it led me to really question what I was being taught, and led me down the path. I did end up in my later years going through conversion therapy. That, of course, was also the result, of my religion and my parents' role in politics. Not only was my dad a Republican congressman, but my mom was also a political activist, and she, worked with organizations like um, that were promoting, like Republican Christian family values. One of them, United Families International, and one of their main missions was to block LGBTQ rights, either to block them from progressing, or even to try to strip ones that have already been made policy, try to have them retracted, or to have doing petitions to have them taken away. And so in their work, they came across this practitioner of conversion therapy. And so as I was hitting my late teens, and things were really starting to come to a head, because nothing that I was doing in my like pleading to God was making a difference. Nothing was changing, despite, I don't know, the thousands of prayers that I probably asked for it to happen, or the many, many hours I spent on my knees or reading scripture. And so when my parents came across this man, they, they didn't, it wasn't anything that they forced on me. They didn't say, you have to do this. They said, this is something that we've heard about, and he claims that he can help you, help you change. And so he didn't call it conversion therapy, of course, because that was already being demonized. But he called it reparative therapy. We're going to repair the wounds that caused your sexuality. Or they wouldn't even call it like gay or homosexuality. They would just call it like same-sex attraction, because it's not your fault that you're attracted to the same sex, but being gay was what they called it. It was a choice that they classified it, or they classified it as a choice. That was a lifestyle that you could choose to not live and just live your life as a person who suffers with or struggles with same-sex attraction. But they would give you the tools to fight that and overcome it. And so,
Implying something is broken because it's a repair.
yes,
Oh wow.
yes, and so, me, with all of this guilt that I was carrying, the fear of like what could happen within my dad's career, or with my dad's career, I decided, as someone who ultimately doesn't feel they have any other choice, I made the decision to go forward with it. If you can call that choosing. And
lead somebody to the water, right? But it's everything played into sort of creating the environment that left you with no other choice, knowing how great and devoted as a person you are. So, yeah.
Yes, because there was nowhere in my life was I receiving or hearing the message that it was okay, that there was nothing wrong with who I was. Every message that I received said otherwise, and that continued, or even that escalated when I started conversion therapy, because they drilled home the fact that I was broken. And like you were saying, we have to repair what's broken. And so it was all of these things combined that really, once I woke up from that, and I left that behind, it's all of that pain and suffering that I experienced, a lot for those, like, I think from the time I recognized that I was gay until the time I was out of conversion therapy, it was, I think, 11 years. And once I left conversion therapy, it's when I decided that I would pursue the path that I'm on, the career path of getting into mental health and healthcare, because
For a second, at this point, you're 20.
Yes.
And from 9 to 20, that's the years where people try out different professions. They have friends, right? That's where you build your social skills. All those 11 years, that's where you're just struggling by trying to perform whoever you're supposed to be, or the role that was cast for you without you being asked to be cast for this role.
Yes.
And so at 20, where do you find yourself where you say, okay, I will be fighting for this cause? And sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to make that point. Those are very crucial years. So it means no friends, no socializing, really only focusing on you as the core problem, right? And fighting not to be fixed because you internally knew nothing was broken, right?
Yes. It's, adolescence is a time where you're supposed to find your community. You're supposed to explore romance. You're supposed to become an individual, and establish your own autonomy. But, while I had some friends here or there, I was never able to actually be honest with them. Like you're saying, I was performing for them. I was doing what I felt I had to fit in with them, and to not become the monster that I felt that I was, to the rest of the world. And so, ultimately, part of my 20s was also experiencing adolescence for the first time. It's something that we see a lot in the LGBTQ community, especially, in probably like millennials and up. We see that it's not until a person comes out that they really get to experience that exploration of romance and who they are as a person. And so often it ends up being significantly delayed. And so that was my life. When I finally did come out, was, I'm going to see what romance is all about. I'm going to try this out, find my tribe. So it wasn't because of the early influence in my life, it was a really difficult decision. And at the time, because of the influence of um, conservatism and religion on my family, they weren't happy for me at first. That took many years, and we can talk about that as well. But initially, they it was kind of like, well, okay, do what you're gonna do. They saw it as an act of rebellion. Me just like being owning who I was, and pursuing my own happiness. To them, that was rebellion. And so it was like, well, you can do that, but like, we don't really want to talk about it. Like, we won't welcome any partner that you may have. Like, we don't want to be in that world with you.
So really more saying, now you're an outcast, pretty much, right? But you were able to leave when you turned 21, right? Or what was that time where you were allowed to even have your own life, even if it wasn't recognized, but on the side?
So that was right after I left conversion therapy when I was 20, that I started to like go on dates with guys or men. And so it wasn't until then that I really started to experience like what life had to offer.
I'm just trying to, it sounds so just painful, right? And I'm trying to put myself into your situation, trying to understand. And this is as hard as it is to understand. I can only also see that this situation is so familiar to so many who are probably listening, or perhaps not even knowing that we are having this conversation. This is so relevant, right? But your story, and first of all, thank you so much for sharing such personal experience. I know it's very hard talking about it, regardless how many years have passed. This is your version that is still within you. It's still you. It reminds me on this picture when you see a beautiful flower just growing in the concrete. It kind of like fights for its existence.
Yeah.
It makes the best out of the environment. I'm just going to blossom.
Yeah.
Can you take us to the moment where you dared to experience your own tribe, as you said, go on a date, have a romantic experience? How did it feel to be free?
Well, it was very scary at first, because I believed that if I was to go that route, ultimately that meant I had to leave behind the entire foundation of my life up until that point, and potentially lose my family. I was kind of on the fringe with them. It was kind of like, well, you're still part of the family, but like almost like conditionally.
Like publicly, not really, because it doesn't align, right?
Yeah, it was. And I was still invited to family things, but like I said, of course, if I had a partner, they wouldn't be allowed. I was still like invited to family dinners, but ultimately, I never felt like I could connect with my family because I couldn't talk to them about the most important parts of my life, which was who I am, who I love, and what I was passionate about.
But also, those little conversations that are often underestimated at a young age, where you have a person that you can share your dreams, perhaps anxiety with. Oh, I had my first date, I had my kiss, or he said she, like all that kind of stuff that goes inside, but have somebody whom you trust who can offer advice or just to be there for you. All those little conversations, those were missed. So, and if any
Mhm.
contact you were seeking, those were actually the complete reverse. So you would shut down even more. Um, so it's just your inner strength is so impressive, really. It's what saved you. Ultimately, now saves way more people. Um, but, in terms of, um, I was not familiar with the conversion therapy. I know the term.
Mhm.
I wasn't familiar with the ideology. I knew the perception of it or the goal, but how long did it take? Was that a year? Was that a program? Was that something? Because I feel this is a very important moment in your life where you decided now it's time to leave. Now I'm done. I've experienced
Mhm.
it.
So from the time I started it until I left it, I think it was mm, a year and a half, or about maybe a year and 8 months,
Wow.
that I was experiencing that, and that included weekly individual therapy, weekly group therapy, and the occasional weekend outing. Like I think one was called Journey into Manhood, where it's like you go and spend a weekend with a group of other men who are dealing with the same thing, or going through conversion therapy, and together you learn how to do like traditional heteromasculine bonding so that you can fill the void of masculine energy that you missed growing up in childhood because you had an emotionally distant or like a physically distant father, and therefore had a deficit that created these wounds.
And I mean, I'm smiling because it sounds, you know, insane, in
It's
other words, but
yeah.
it's scary though. This is like,
Hmm.
wow. So you are well, but in other words, the conversion therapy actually converted you fully to being you, which is, it kind of weirdly, but it worked out in terms of you understood what exactly you want. Um,
Hmm.
and now, how does this experience? Because I interrupted you again. Apologies. Where you said at
No
20
worries.
you started pursuing it more as your career and as your purpose. So, what was there a moment where you thought, I actually want to serve others and I want to help others who might be in my situation?
Yeah, so actually, interestingly enough, I started pursuing my degree in psychology while I was in conversion therapy, and to be honest, I actually started thinking um, uh, that I'm because when I was that was when I was drinking the Kool-Aid fully. I started it thinking maybe I could help others like me change who they are. If like with these skills that I'm learning myself, um, and and I look back and I realize part of that was due to grooming by the conversion therapist, who, you know, I think because of my family's political background, and so like they're being well known, their publicity. I at one point had expressed that I felt like I was called for more. And at that point, he kind of like wondered out loud, oh, I wonder if that could have something to do with the ex-gay movement. And I grabbed onto that, and I thought, oh yeah, maybe it could. And so um, I started my degree in psychology with that in mind. And when I realized how bogus it was and I left it, I made that decision at that point that, I'm going to help protect people from this. This is something that people need to be aware of and the harms that it can cause. And people need to know that they can be who they are, or they can and feel affirmed in their identity. And so I went from my psychology degree to medical school, and then pursued psychiatric training, because I went back and forth between doing therapy or medicine, and I decided I wanted to have some other tools. So in medical or psychiatric training, we learn all of the general medicine stuff, but then we also learn therapy, and we learn all about mental health. We're trained in to become experts in it, and so that's why ended up going that route. But even with doing that, and I realized that when it comes to mental health tools and or even psychiatric medicine, that nothing really was enough to be able to help this community or other marginalized communities, because so much of what they're dealing with, all of their mental health issues, are caused by their marginalization or the oppression that they're going through. And so throwing, you can't meditate your way out of oppression. You can't medicate oppression away. And so I realized that the best way to help people was to that meant doing even more. And so that's, kind of the trajectory that I've been on as a result of all of that.
And it's really that injustice, but also understanding your own journey. Because what I feel is, first, it's the fight between a very loving son, very devoted to the family, very much in love with family, in serving the family, but really neglecting your own self and not loving yourself enough. So you had to love yourself into becoming who you are today. And then once you realize how important that is, of course, you want to serve others, because they're feeling the pain. I'm just curious, how many people whom you help know exactly that you've been through such tremendous experience? Do you share it, or do they see you as that prominent person who they meet now?
So, those who have maybe come across my online presence are aware of it, or maybe have looked into and learned more. But while sometimes I will talk about, as I'm maybe teaching different tools or things like that, or trying to help them understand their experience more, I might relate by talking about some of my own mental health journey. But don't I don't volunteer the details really about things to people that I'm working with. And part of that is, as a mental health expert, you're there for them.
Yeah.
And so generally, if you when you make any kind of disclosure about yourself, it has to be done for the purpose of their healing. And in no way can it influence them to ultimately feel the need to become your therapist, or your and console you, or start focusing on what you went through.
A lot of people talk about systemic change. Is it possible? What can we do? How is the point of injustice that has been done to you, how is it connected to your work? Because I know you do combine both. And therapy, healing, understanding, but also how can we change the world, right? For lack of a better word, to even not end up in such situations, in such like you were before?
You know, I have to believe that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't, I think would, I don't know. I don't think I could be on this path that I am. Um, and so, um, I think for, for people to get into this type of work, they, I think it's hard to be able to do it unless you have experienced injustice of some kind. It's hard to even, it's hard for a lot of people to even believe that it occurs unless they've gone through it themselves. And
Yeah.
so, one of the things that I've realized is that even those who haven't experienced injustice, if if they hear stories of injustice and can and of course you have to believe the story, but you know if they hear enough about injustice occurring um, or have it presented in a way that they connect with, even if they haven't experienced it, it becomes something that is more important to them now. And I think they are more likely to buy in if they've been, if some, in some way, stories of injustices have connected with them. And so that's part of why I wrote the book, was to take my experience of injustice and put that together with my expertise from my education and training. Almost like taking my experience and then like psychoanalyzing it with like other data and statistics, and packaging that in a way that is palatable. And my, like, with that, that's my hope, and is that it will connect with people on a deeper level, such that they will actually care. And even if they don't go out there to fight injustice themselves, if they just stop being unjust,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
then there's a huge trickle effect or ripple effect that occurs from that. Especially, if it's the parent of an LGBTQ child. Um, if you know if they're if they're not understanding, or they see it in the same ways that my family did, um, and their child is not likely to have the words, um, or the voice to speak up for themselves, the knowledge or the understanding that there's nothing wrong with who they are, that they should be affirmed. Even if they did, a lot of times parents just like brush it off, like, what do you know? You're the kid. But if they can hear that in a way that will even just change how they respond to their child, so that their child doesn't have to grow up with the trauma that comes from being rejected by their family, or heaven forbid, going through conversion therapy. And there's actually been a lot of research that shows um, that the damaging effects of conversion therapy don't happen in conversion therapy alone. They happen in the home with identity rejection.
Yeah.
And so they call them conversion efforts. Even if as a parent you don't put your child in
Mm-hmm.
in a session with a conversion therapy practitioner,
Mm-hmm.
um, like, even if you don't do that, if you reject their identity, if you don't let them have friends who relate, if you don't let them experience romance and explore adolescence in the ways that they should, as their true self,
Yeah.
um, that can be as damaging as if you put them in front of a conversion therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And so if nothing else, but people, like I said, especially these parents, can change their behaviors, then things can be so much different for people. And if people that are in power or people that have influence can also experience that change, and therefore that like change may ripple beyond their own family or their communities, then that's how we really start to make change. People always ask me growing up, do you want to follow in your dad's footsteps and become a politician? And, when I was young, I thought maybe, but now I realize that, like, if I want to do real change, it's not going to be making policy. Like, politicians rarely make change. Let's be real. They're all around there just blocking each other's capacity to actually make change. And I realized that if I really wanted to make change, it would be by influencing people, the people who vote for politicians, not the people who are out there making the policy.
And this is huge because I think this is the key really to any kind of change, because as long as we see the politicians as those citizens who are elected to represent views of a certain demographic and or location, state, city, whatnot, it really starts on the smallest levels too, right? Because those are affecting schools, education, what's really being studied and read by kids, right? Or what is forbidden to even discuss. But to see people who are elected as servants rather than celebrities or leaders or idols that you go either one way or another way. But it really starts with from within. Even at that kitchen table talk, right? The way parents react, and it doesn't even have to be words. There's so many situations where a kid is sharing a dream and somebody says, oh, just brushes it off. And that tiny experience can really manifest in a very big trauma. So to your point, being conscious parent is key, especially in the environment now where kids are exposed to everything and anything. And that hatred, as much as we want to block algorithms or whatever, I don't think we will be somewhere on that day where, everything is controlled. But what we can control is the understanding, right? For the kid to see, or for adult also to see, does not define me. This comment doesn't define me, or this reaction. What prompted you to write the book? Because I know your book is a guide, and I'm happy you mentioned it. By the way, the link to the book is in the description. You also see it here. It's on Matt's website. Go and order, download there.
Yes.
And really share it, because it's a guide that I feel it's your case study, as you mentioned. It's a story, of course, but also it's a guide. So share it with those who, are parents or becoming parents, because I think the more you know, the better you are equipped. But from your perspective, when was the moment where you thought the guide or the book now is necessary?
So, I actually decided, or it became a goal or dream of mine, about, maybe just over 10 years ago, while I think it was early on in medical school. But it never seemed to really form. And it was really after I went back to school at Georgetown. Like I was telling you, how I realized that mental health and medical treatments or psychiatric medications were not enough to really serve the people, especially the LGBTQ community and other marginalized communities, to really change things for them. So I went to Georgetown and I got a master's in health and public interest, which kind of combined health aspects of with what I was very interested in, which was starting to be able to reach the public and connect with people to make change. And there I learned about the social determinants of health, which are those which have been found to be often much more have a much greater impact on a person's health and well-being than like if they smoke. And these are things like their zip code, the color of their skin, the their sexual orientation or gender identity. These are considered the social determinants, whether they've experienced discrimination of some kind, and the social determinants can cause can like contribute to heart disease, diabetes. They have such a strong impact that even here in DC, where you have people in the Northwest, on average, living 20 years longer than people in the Southeast across the Anacostia. And to me, that is just unacceptable. And so it was as I was finishing my degree there that I decided to finally write this book and to use my experience of marginalization and to demonstrate the social determinants of my own health and the ways that they impacted me, but also so as a guide to show how to ultimately then prevent them or to make change for those who are struggling to accept or embrace themselves, for them to learn how to do that, for those who are working to accept and embrace others, for them to see how to do that. And so ultimately, my book calls for a moral evolution, societal and religious reform, to embrace diversity in all its forms, because ultimately what I've recognized is that acceptance isn't enough. Acceptance is like, yes, you can be a part of us, but like that's it. You're on the fringe, like I was with my family. You're still kind of a them, but like you're welcome to be here. Whereas like embracing is saying, we see you, we celebrate you, and affirming people as they are, recognizing that as a result of their diverse experiences, they bring a richness and so many strengths and positives into our society that if we harness all of these differences that we have, we could progress in so much more rapidly, and in a way that is inclusive of all people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was ultimately the impetus, the final driver for me to undertake it and to start that.
And now there couldn't be better time than now, because we certainly, that box is open. We can talk about things that we were not really allowed or welcome to talk about before, but it's also the time is essential as to those who will take that spot when we talk about issues, right? Because when we open the stage, and who will show up on that stage, and the messages that they will convey will shape, right, the change or the conversation. So I'm so again, honored and excited really for what you do. And for your bravery that you're speaking out and speaking up and really claiming the spot, because it's essential.
Thank you.
But I wanted to, first of all, again, please go to the website. It's in the description of this episode. I know Matt is not going to tell you and promote himself, so I'm going to tell you that. Go and click. If you leave this interview, you can always come back. go download and share it, because sometimes, I shared that. We had a pre-chat about a week ago. I said, you help people, or you hear the whispers, right, for help, right, for those who you
Hmm.
didn't work with. And it's so essential to catch that pain at the whisper stage and not at the screaming stage, because that means the
Yeah.
damage has been done, and there will be repercussions from that. One thing,
Hmm.
give people a bit of a happy ending. How's your connection with your family now, if you don't mind sharing? And how did you get there?
Yeah. So that is a happy ending. And that's really become especially evident as my book has come out and they've gotten the chance to read it and finally really understand things that they hadn't before because I wasn't sharing parts of my life with them. Um, you know, Over the course of the last decade and a half or so since I left conversion therapy and they started out kind of from a um, intolerant, but like I said, kind of you're part of us, but like we don't accept any of this other stuff. They move to a place of, you know, we see that this isn't something that you've chosen. We see that this is who you are, and recognizing, we love who you are, and so um, that means that we love you. We love this, and we want you to be happy. We want you to. My dad at one point told me, I want you to have what I have with your mom. I want you to have what your siblings have with their partners, and I want that to be with somebody that you love, no matter what. Uh, and so it has been um, an evolution, um, and and I use I use that as part of to help explain or to help provide that guide in using the ways that evolution played out, or kind of outlining how that happened. But it required that I create some emotional and psychological boundaries for myself up front, so that I wouldn't be harmed further, and until they were had evolved more or had um, grown more in that way or toward more of an embracing of my identity. And over time, I shared stories with them. I started to open up more. I shared stories about friends that I had or people that I knew who'd been completely disowned by their families and completely cut off, kicked out. And as they learned this, they, they, I think on one hand, they saw or they really started to see how horrible it was that people could be treated that way, just because of this part of who they are. And it was learning stories and seeing the injustice that, even though they didn't have their own experiences of injustice in this way or to like any kind of degree like this, that they were able to be moved, and arrive at the point we are now, where as my when my book came out, they've both my parents have told me how wonderful they think it is and how they can't wait to see how it helps people. My dad read it maybe in like one sitting, and he called me multiple times while he was reading it, and I was working, so he left me voicemails, and one of them he's crying, and he's like, I'm crying not because I'm sad, but because I'm so proud of you. And so, it's been, even this writing this book, because while I hope it heals the division in our society, it's been very healing for me and my family as well.
Man, I'm crying listening to this. It's beautiful. But see, you
Thank
made it.
you.
You made it, and that beauty came out of the most struggle and pain turning pain into power, but you really turn pain into love. And that's truly the most honorable achievement. But for your parents, also compliments to them for being open, right? To not being open on time or being enough, but making the turn, really listening and seeing you and respecting you. I think ultimately it comes down to every person wants to be seen, respected, and understood, heard.
Yes.
Even if we don't agree, I think that's the bare minimum we should give to each other, is listening and understanding. Because we're different, and that's what makes us special and great. There is never any experiment where people were supposed to be copy pastes of each other ended well. So this is really, such an important way. What would you tell somebody? I know it's not on our question list, but I think to round it up, what would you tell somebody who is perhaps that little Matt or whoever who's watching this and is looking for resources, perhaps will, read your story, heard your story, found that glimpse of hope, but is still very much closeted, very much away from the real life, living somewhere inside. Any few words to lift them with?
First, I would just tell them how sorry that I am. Tell them that every part of them is wonderful. And while they might not be in a space right now that affirms that they can trust that that's true, and that if they can hold out, they will be able to find that kind of affirmation in their lives. And that there are resources out there. The Trevor Project is an amazing resource for LGBTQ children and adolescents, especially as a mental health resource, and they offer crisis support as well. There is an organization called Born Perfect that they're working to fight conversion therapy laws across the country. That's another great resource. Or PFLAG even has resources for young people, even if their families are not on their side.
And we'll just took note. We'll put all the links in the description. So take your time, select the link or all three, and click. And you said that every little part is beautiful of the person who's watching you. Every part of you is beautiful, Matt.
Thank you so much.
I'm just so truly honored.
Blushing.
Story. No, it's all good. You deserve it. No, I'm just honored really to be here with you, and I'm grateful. And I think no matter when people watch it, listen to it, whether it's today or in a year or 5 or 10 or 20, I'm sure lives will be saved, and that's really all we can hope for. It's the biggest achievement.
Well, thank you, Olga. It's been honestly such a pleasure. I have appreciated every minute of it.
Thank you so much. And everybody, share this conversation, because you never know who will need it. They don't talk to you about it yet, but they will. So thank you so much, Matt, and thank you so much, everybody, for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to check the links in the description of this episode and subscribe. We have fantastic interviews coming up for you. See you next time.